Good evening, my YouTube friends. Tonight's video is about the Cakewalk by BandLab ProChannel versus the Studio One, or maybe better named PreSonus Fat Channel. These are both channel strips that are built into the two different DAWs, and tonight I'm going to go over kind of a 10,000 foot view between the two and why I prefer one over the other. Coming up next. All right, so if you've been watching me, you know that I've switched from Cakewalk to Studio One a couple years back, but I still have Cakewalk on my system and I follow along with the developments. In fact, a new development came out in the last day or so with Cakewalk and a new fast track version available there. So definitely there's still a lot of development going on the Cakewalk side of things. So I like to keep up with that. I also like to make sure that the DAW that I'm using makes the most sense for me. So I kind of went back and I took a look at the Pro channel that comes with Cakewalk versus the Fat channel that comes with Studio One and some of the expansions of that to determine, do I really still prefer Studio One? And also another important fact is that I use the console one from Softtube, which is a hardware device down there that's got knobs and all of that on it, as well as a plugin that comes up on screen that allows me to control all of my channels with an SSL 4000E and also a Neve emulation, or they call it the British channel, for a bunch of different phases. I use that as my channel strip anyway, so the only case where I would be using either the Pro channel or the Fat channel would be if there was something one of them did that the console one doesn't do, or if I was looking for a particular flavor of something, I might add one of those in there. But for this video, I'm going to stick to the Pro channel for Cakewalk and the Fat channel for Studio One, and kind of going over the pros and cons. So looking up here at the screen, I'm going to start on the Cakewalk side, right? So here I have Cakewalk by BandLab open, and I have the Pro channel over there on the left-hand side as it looks for my drums bus. Right now, I was originally going to do this video as an audio comparison between the two, but as I struggled with the difficulties of trying to get my audio interface to work in both DAWs at the same time, which of course it wouldn't do very well, and I actually went through and did the sonic comparisons for myself, I don't know that they would translate well enough on YouTube, and I kind of have my preferences at the end of it. So I'm going to show you what it looks like on screen, and you're just going to have to take my word for it on the sound of these two things. So here we have, this is the, like I said, this is the drum bus. I've recorded some drums. I ran those through there. I did some comparisons between the two individual track levels and also on the bus level to compare the compressors, the EQs, and that sort of thing. So here on the left-hand side, we've got a Pro channel view as it looks. So I'm going to start here up at the top, and you can see what I've got in here right now is the this is a bus compressor. Now, the bus compressor on this particular thing, I don't know exactly what it's trying to emulate, but you can see it's got the threshold, attack, release, makeup gain, a high pass filter, a ratio, and a dry wet. Underneath there we have the EQ. Underneath there we have a tube emulation, and underneath there we have a console emulation. that's what's in here right now. There are some additional things that you can add to this, like you can put the reverb in there. You can put the rematrix in there. There's a saturation knob you can stick in there, as well as a tape emulator, and you can also use FX chains in there. One of the pros for the Pro channel is this ability to stick an FX chain in there. And why does this matter? So the way that these are processed is from top to bottom. So I'm going to go from the compressor into the EQ, and then into the tube, and then into the console emulation. But if I wanted to, I could say I want to insert an FX chain. And when I put the FX chain in here, you'll see by default, here it is up at the top. And then I can add whatever effects that I want. So let's say, for example, I happen to stick in a, an old Sonitis delay, whatever. So I can put a number of these different things in here, and then I can take that chain and I can put it anywhere in the overall list of top to bottom. So I could stick that delay between the compressor and the EQ, or between the EQ and the console emulation, or whatever. So this is something that within the strip itself, PreSonus Fat Channel doesn't have. There's a way around it, and I'm going to show how that works when we get over to the Studio One side. So that's one of the benefits on the Pro channel side of things. The other benefit that I see from the Pro channel side is that, as you can see right now, I am simply here in my channel view. So here I'm on the bus channel. This bit down here at the bottom is something that in Studio One does not exist. There is no ability to see buses themselves in the track view. You have to go to the mix view. Now, for me, that makes sense. For some people that are, especially if you're coming from Cakewalk, it's a little bit weird. So here I am looking at the actual bus. And of course I could do that through the console view as well. And you can see here I am in the console view, and I am actually going to go over here to that bus. That's the drums bus, and you can see the Pro channel appears here on the left for that as well. Something else that I do like about this is that it's a relatively compact view, and you can see a bunch of stuff in it at once. You can actually expand the EQ out, right? So it comes out into that view, and you get the big view of the EQ, where you can see the whole curve and all of the options and whatnot in there. But aside from that, it's kind of the end of the pros for me. Now, looking at this from a bus compressor, you can see there, and then, if I come down here to a track, by default, it's going to go to the track compressor instead. And that compressor is kind of more the, you can see the buttons here, the 4, the 8, the 12, 20, all in. So you can see, pretty much what that compressor is trying to emulate there at the track level. And at the bus level, I don't honestly know what the emulation is. It's a little different. The EQ is pretty flexible. It's very usable. Honestly, I don't see a huge difference between the different EQs when you're talking about those that work on this graph type of a view, which is kind of the way that the default is in Studio One. But I do like the quad curve EQ in here. I think it sounds good. It's got some different options for the kind of emulation that it does when you look at the differences between the curves on the E-type, the G-type. I'm guessing those are SSL-E and SSL-G type compressors. I'm not really exactly sure what the pure and the hybrid are, but they're all just kind of differences in the way that the curves work, in the way that the overall sound of those curves is in the EQ. And we've got a compressor. And then at the bottom, we've got this console emulation. And I tried really hard as I listened to this whole drum mix, and I went through a bus, and I even took the drive and ran it completely up to 100% there, and changed between the S type, of course that's an SSL, the N type, which is going to be a Neve type, and the A type, which is going to be an API type. And I could barely hear the difference between those. And I can tell you, on the Console One, when I switched from the SSL to the British, which the British Class A, which is the Neve equivalent, and I've also tried the API demo. I don't own that one, but I've tried the API demo out, and there is absolutely a very clear difference between the three of them. In the Cakewalk version, when I switched my console from S to N to A and back and forth, basically I could not hear the difference no matter how hard I tried to listen to it. Maybe I'm doing something wrong, but they all pretty much sounded the same to me. And even turning the console emulation on and off wasn't compelling. I didn't think, wow, I would go to that studio versus that one because of that console at all. When I switch my versions in the console one, I hear a huge difference between those the two different console emulations, even to the point where I will use one over the other on drums or vocals or guitar or whatnot. So I don't think that this is for me, a very compelling difference. I just really didn't hear it. So that's kind of how the stack looks in Cakewalk for the Pro channel and how that lays out. Now I want to compare that now to the Fat channel. So here we are in Studio One, and I'm going to bring up, so this is the downside for Studio One, is you'll see that I don't have my buses anywhere here. These are just my tracks. And even if I bring up the side view on this, I don't see those there either. I don't have any way to get to this, even though this folder for drums represents the bus that's going to be in the mix view. For whatever reason, I can't see it as a mix view here, right? So I'm gonna go into the mix view instead. And you can see I'm going to add the Fat channel, or I actually have the Fat channel over here in my drum bus. So I'm going to pull the Fat channel open, and by default, this is what it looks like. Now I'm going to get rid of my mix view now because I don't need it, and it's a little distracting. So by default, this is what it looks like. And you can see there's this icon here that allows me to see all of the parts. Of course, you can widen this and look at them side by side like this. Right here, we can see the EQ, the input stuff, the compressor and the limiter and whatnot side to side. And if you've got a big enough screen to do that with, I guess that's one way to do it. But the better option to me is to view it in this stack where you see the high pass, the gate, the EQ, the compressor, and the limiter, and you can switch those two up here, compressor EQ or EQ into compressor, whatever your preference is on that. And these are the default modules that come with Studio One. So, looking at this, it's similar to the Quad Curve. Honestly, I don't really know what the differences are as far as the audio is concerned. I kind of look at EQ of this sort as if I do a cut or I do a boost, I expect to hear them. And I think that's in the Cakewalk version. That's kind of what Pure is about. And that's kind of how this one sounds to me. In the compressor version, we've got our basic compressor. This is a lot more, I think, from a layout and function perspective, like the old Sonitis one is in Cakewalk. Not very much like the one that's in the Pro channel. If you want one that's like the Pro channel, then we would switch out this compressor with that type. And this is one of the pros for the Fat channel. Aside from the fact that personally, I think that the Fat channel is nicer to look at. And I know there's a lot of people out there who would say, well, who cares what it looks like? It doesn't even matter. I think it does. And here's why I think it does is, especially if you're used to the hardware and you know what that hardware looks like, having an implementation on screen that looks like that hardware makes it more familiar. So you're going to more easily adapt to that view on screen. But aside from the fact that it looks better, I personally think that they also sound better for the same types. Now, we saw over in Cakewalk, in the compressor at the bus level, right? So here we're on the drums bus. This compressor is, I don't, like I said, I don't really know which one it is, but if we look at the channel compressor, you can see pretty clearly that's the 5-button type. If I come over to Studio One, I can replace this compressor by clicking this drop down up here. And by default, we have 3 options: a standard, a tube, and a FET compressor. The FET is pretty clearly what Cakewalk is trying to do over there. You've got your 5 buttons in, you've got your in, your out, your attack, release, and the buttons. If you go over to the Cakewalk version, you can see that same thing: in, out, attack, release, and the 5 buttons. I think that's what they're going for on that. I personally think that the Studio One version of this FET compressor sounds better than the ProChannel version that's over there in Cakewalk. Now, the ability to add the FX chains. Now you can see there's no way for me to put an effect between the EQ and the compressor here, because the fat channel is just made to be a channel strip and not made to have anything inside of it. So if I'm looking at the mix window here, for example, on this, right? So here we are on the drum bus. That's this bright blue channel here. You can see here's my fat channel. I happen to have a console 1 sitting in there. It's not enabled right now. So if I wanted to stick something in the middle of this, say between the EQ and the compressor, I could come into the EQ on this one, and then I could take another fat channel and drop it in here after, and not do an EQ there, and I could do a, say the compressor, right? So now I've got 2 fat channels on this one, and one of them is using the EQ, one of them is using the compressor, this one, and then in between I could stick whatever else I wanted. So if you happen to want to do something like that, you could, for example, if I wanted to put in the pedal board in between those 2, and in that pedal board, let's say I wanted to stick a tube driver, whatever. So now I've got my tube driver in the pedal board sitting between the EQ on that fat channel and the compressor on that fat channel. I'm not going to be able to say that. So there is a way to accomplish the same thing. It just winds up being a little bit more complicated. Again, Cakewalk does kind of win a little bit on the ability to see the stuff that's in here, but Studio One does allow you to see, here we have the gate, the EQ, the compressor module, and the limiter module all within here, so we can kind of see some rough views of those here in the mixer. But when you open them up, of course, you have a bigger selection. So that's the how to make it work like the FX chains inside of that strip. So you can get around it. For me personally, I probably never stick anything in the middle of the channel strip anyway. It's probably always going to be after that strip happens anyway, and just like it would do in a standard mixer. So the other benefit for the fat channel, and this maybe used to be for the Pro channel, you could go out and you could buy separate modules to add in there. But when Gibson dumped Cakewalk, the ability to purchase those went out the window. Now, they may be available out there somewhere. I don't know how you add them, but there are a couple of additional modules that you can add. In the Fat channel, under the EQ section, the ones that come with it by default are the standard, the passive, and the vintage. But you'll see I have all these other ones, the Alpine, Baxandall, the RC500, the Solar, the Tube, the Vintage 3-band, and the VT1. These EQs are all available to stick in here. So for example, if I wanted to put, the Tube EQ in there, I can mix that in. And then same thing with the compressors. I have a whole list. The default ones that come with Studio One are going to be the standard, the Tube, I think we recognize that one, and the FET, which we already talked about. Those are the defaults. But we also have a brick comp, which is like a Neve, a classic comp. I'm sorry, the brick comp is like the SSL, the classic comp is like a Neve, comp 160, the Everest, Fairchild, RC500 which is a PreSonus thing, and a Tube Tech, right? So we can kind of stack a Tube Tech in there as well. We have a ton more options. Now, these options are available as a separate purchase, right? So you can go and you can buy the Fat Channel collection for $150. Now, in my case, I happen to be in PreSonus Sphere, and PreSonus Sphere includes all of the PreSonus stuff. So in my case, I've got the Fat Channel, which came with Console One or with Studio One, and I also have the Fat Channel collection as a part of my Sphere membership, in addition to all of their other plugins. But you can buy the Fat Channel separately for $59, and the collection for $149.95 right now. And that's all these extra bits and pieces of the EQs and the compressors that you see in here. What's kind of cool about this is that if those are things that you want to get, maybe you want to sign up for Sphere, maybe you don't, but maybe you like all of those additional options instead of the Pro channel. I'm going to come back over here to Cakewalk, because you will see if I go into the browser in Cakewalk that I have in my audio effects, I have the option of the Fat channel. And this is because they allow you to use these outside of the Studio One environment, and that happens through them being available as VST plugins to other things. So I can come in here, add the Fat channel. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to put my Fat channel on the drums bus, and lo and behold, look, I have all of the same exact options now in Cakewalk. Whether you use Studio One or Cakewalk by BandLab and the Pro channel or the Fat channel, I'm sure you're going to be able to get great sounding recordings one way or the other. Personally, for me, I prefer the Fat channel in Studio One. You might have different results. I hope this video comparison has been useful for you and that you'll like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to watch this video. Have a good one.